Hello, this is Andre from Heroic Cyborg Studios, and today we will be looking at a model that I've been hard at work on, as well as going over how you can make one yourself. I will be making this model available in 3 scales with 2 different base options. Miniature, which is great for tabletop gaming, medium, which is a good option if you want to display your model on a desk or shelf, but don't want it to take up too much space, and of course large, which is for if you really want the full impact of the model to stand out in your collection. Whether you're a beginner or have painted dozens of models in the past, I wanted to make a little guide that I hope will be useful to anyone who is interested in getting one of these for themselves. So here, I will be going over 3 different ways that you could potentially tackle this project, starting from the easiest and fastest method, then progressing to more advanced methods. Starting with the easiest example, we will be selecting the miniature version of the figure. Both the miniature and the medium scale figure come in one solid part and do not need to be assembled, so this will make things a bit easier for us. Since we are trying to keep things simple for this example, we will be doing minimal cleanup on the model. However, we will use a hobby knife to maybe clean up a couple of small supports. For example, you may see a little nub here and maybe some small supports here that I have intentionally left for demonstration purposes. If those are something that bother you, you can easily just clean them up with a knife. If they don't bother you, just go on ahead to the next step. After this, we will be priming the model. For this, you will want a mask, some gloves, and of course your primer. I only have this black primer here for demonstration, but I actually recommend a light gray or white primer as it will really help the reds and blues pop, whereas these colors can kind of get sucked away into a black primer. Once the primer has sufficiently dried, we can get to the fun part, painting the model. You will want some brushes, and in particular, you will want a very fine brush to get some of the smaller details. For this model, I exclusively used Vallejo paints, which will be in the description, but I will also go ahead and show them here. I have some game color Vallejo paints. This one is Imperial Blue. I also have a Scarlet Blood. I have a couple of Mecha color paints. It is Pure Black. I also have a light steel, and then finally I also have some paints from the model color line, which are dark gray, flat yellow, and white. Now these are the paints that I used for essentially the Rein part of the model. If you want to have the premium version of the base, then you would also want to have a purple and potentially a gold as well. And the purple that I used is the model color blue violet, and the gold is the model color gold. When painting, I recommend going from inside to outside. So, for example, I would probably want to paint the harder to reach area underneath the rib cage with black or gray first, before painting the more elevated details like the silver part right here on the window frame on the chest. This makes it so that you don't have to stress too much about being precise with your initial coat of paint, since you will just be able to clean up the edges later on. Once the model is all painted up to your liking, we will just let it dry once again, and then go ahead and finish it off with a gloss top coat. At that point, the model is ready to go. Have fun! In the intermediate difficulty example, we will be using the medium scale statue. The main difference here is that we'll be spending a bit more time prepping the model before painting it. To do this, I recommend wet sanding the model using a little spray bottle with some water, just like this one. This keeps the resin dust particles from flying around, and you can also keep a
bucket of water near you to rinse off the model every once in a while. I will generally start with some sandpaper of about 350 grit and then go up to about 1500 grit. Additionally, if we really want a pristine surface, we can use this stuff called Mr. Surfacer. The way this works is if we have small divots in the model, we can use a brush to apply this to the divots, and after waiting an hour or so for it to dry, we can go over the area again with some sandpaper. This fills in the divots and gives us a really nice finish. The painting process will go much the same as with the previous example, but this time we might want to use a technique called zenithal priming. What this means is that we'll start by priming the model completely black, and then once it has dried, we can spray on some white primer over the black to imitate a light source. So, for example, you may have already primed this fully black. You just take your spray can, you pick where you want the light source, and then you spray the white paint over on top. This ends up giving us some nice looking natural shadowing in the more recessed areas, while the more elevated areas remain bright. Once the priming is done, we once again can hand paint the model and finish it off with a clear gloss top coat.
Finally, for the advanced example, we'll be selecting the large scale model. The large scale model comes in several parts that will need to be assembled, so the first thing we are going to want to do is to fit test the parts to get a feel for how they all go together. So you're going to want to grab all of them, you're going to want to try and fit them together and see how well they go together. If any sanding is needed to help fit the parts together better, now is the time to do it. If the parts are a little bit loose, that should not be an issue, as we'll be gluing them together later in the build process. We will then follow the same pre-processing steps described in the intermediate example. Again, if there are some imperfections in the model, such as the ones seen here, we just sand them down and use the Mr. Surfacer if needed. The biggest difference in how we will handle this model is that rather than just using spray cans and hand painting, we will also be using an airbrush to get fantastic consistency in our colors. With airbrushing, it is particularly important that we plan out the order that the paints go on, as we will need to mask off any areas that we don't want to cover up with the next coat of paint. As an example, I will again use this shoulder piece. The way I painted it on my model was starting with a base coat of black primer. I then proceeded to spray the entire part silver. At this point, I let the part dry and used masking tape. Here I have some just basic masking tape, as well as some smaller, more precise Tamiya masking tape. And I used that masking tape to mask off all the areas that I wanted to stay silver. After this, I sprayed on white until it was solid. I then also masked off the white stripes and then sprayed on the red. I did it this way because having the white as an undercoat for the red helps with both consistency and vibrancy. Finally, using a fine brush, I hand painted the 8 and the small metal rivets that are found on the shoulder. In addition to basic masking tape, it can be helpful to have some other masking tools for more complex parts of the model. For those more complex areas, I used a combination of Vallejo liquid mask and, funny enough, some silly putty. And I just got like an 8-pack of this stuff on Amazon. I'd also like to point out that you absolutely do not need to use the airbrush for everything, and in fact you should not. Darker colors such as black and navy blue go on very well with a brush, and painting an area with lots of small detail, like the hands, would be much easier with a traditional brush than with an airbrush. Once all of these parts are painted up, be sure to apply a clear gloss top coat, and then the model can be assembled. Ideally, you would want to use a clear 2-part epoxy glue to hold the parts together, although I will admit to being lazy and just using some super glue that I had laying around. Please be aware though that using traditional super glue can leave white residue on your model if you're not careful. I'd like to thank everyone who watched this video, and I hope it was informative and helpful to anyone who is interested in getting one of these models for themselves or who is even just curious about model collecting and painting. If you have any thoughts or questions, I'd love to hear them, either in the comments on this video or via my contact information on my Etsy page. I'm also open to commissions at the moment, so if you have an awesome idea for a figure, please be sure to hit me up. Wishing you all the best, and I'll see you around.